He was just 17, and the night was the only friend he had left. Elijah pulled the diner cap from his head and shoved it in his pocket, feeling the sweat cooling on his neck. The street was quiet, the kind of quiet that tricks you into thinking nothing bad could happen. His shoes scuffed along the sidewalk, and for a moment, he let himself pretend the world was fair. He thought about tomorrow's paycheck, about the way his little sister hugged him when he walked through the door. He never saw the headlights creeping up behind him. They caught him in their beams like he was some animal that didn't belong. Here, the cruiser door swung open, and two men in uniform stepped out, their boots tapping the pavement like a warning. One of them called out, "Hey boy, come over here." Elijah turned slow, hands out, palms open. He'd been taught since he was 5 years old to keep his hands where they could see them. But it didn't matter. Nothing he could do would ever be enough to convince them he was harmless. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. "I'm just going home." The taller officer walked up close enough that Elijah could see his jaw clench. "Where you coming from?" he asked, like it was a crime to be tired and black on a Friday night. Elijah swallowed and said, "I work down at Miller's Diner." The officer smirked, the way a man smirks when he already knows he's going to hurt you. "This is David, and you're watching Injustice Voice. If you feel the weight of this story already, subscribe to the channel, share your thoughts in the comments, and stand with us in saying no more to this cruelty." Elijah reached into his pocket, moving slow, so slow, to pull out his wallet. He wanted to prove he was telling the truth, that he belonged somewhere, that he mattered. But the shorter cop's hand shot to his holster. "Stop!" he yelled. Elijah froze, fingers trembling around the worn leather. "Don't shoot," he whispered, because he'd heard the stories. He'd seen the videos. And now he was living it. They didn't ask any more questions. They didn't wait to see his ID. The tall one shoved him against the squad car so hard his breath left him. Metal pressed into his cheek, cold and unfeeling. Hands cuffed his wrists. A knee dug into his back. He tried to lift his head to say anything, but all that came out was a choking gasp. Across the street, a curtain moved. An old woman peered out through the glass. Her hand flew to her mouth, but she didn't open the door. She didn't call out, because everybody knew if you stepped outside, you could be next. Elijah's heart was beating so fast it felt like it might burst. He tried to tell himself to be still. Maybe if he didn't fight, they'd stop. But the knee pressed harder, grinding him into the metal until sparks burst behind his eyes. He heard his own voice, high and desperate, saying, "Please. Please." 3 houses down, Laverne was folding laundry when she heard the shouting. At first, she thought it was the neighbors arguing again. But then she heard the words "stop," and her son's voice crying out. She didn't put on shoes. She didn't think about her hair tied up in a rag. She just ran. Her feet slapped the pavement. She could see him now, her baby boy, pinned beneath 2 men twice his size. "Get off." "Him," she screamed, but they didn't even look her way. One of them was yelling something about resisting. Elijah's face was turned sideways, tears mixing with the blood from a cut on his cheek. His eyes found hers. In that split second, he didn't look 17. He looked 5 again, calling for his mother to save him. "Please," she begged. Her voice cracked under the weight of everything she'd ever feared. He didn't do anything. But the taller officer only tightened the cuffs until Elijah whimpered. The shorter one radioed for backup, as if they needed more men to crush a skinny kid with a paper hat in his pocket. The old woman behind the curtain pressed her forehead to the glass. The man across the street turned his porch light off. Everyone watched, but no one stepped forward. Because to step forward was to risk everything. Elijah's breath came ragged, wet. The knee pressed into his spine again, harder, harder, until his body jerked. Laverne ran closer, reaching for him, but the officer shoved her back with one arm. She stumbled, caught herself on the car door, and screamed so loud it split the night open. In that instant, the world felt suspended in the air, balanced on the edge of something too cruel to name. All she could see was her son's face, crushed against the metal, eyes wide with terror. He tried to say something, but no words came out. Just that same small sound, over and over, the one that would haunt her dreams forever. Then everything went silent, except for her scream, echoing down the block. The first thing Elijah noticed when he woke up was the hush. Not the hush of peace, but the hush that comes when something has been taken you can't ever get back. He tried to shift on the thin hospital mattress, but pain lit up every nerve like someone had set fire to his bones. He swallowed and tasted metal. When he turned his head, he saw his mother slumped in a chair, her chin resting on her chest. Even asleep, she looked like she was bracing for a blow. The nurses came in and out. They spoke in the careful tones people use when they don't want to admit the truth. A cracked rib, bruises so deep they'd stay for weeks. A hairline fracture near his collarbone. But nothing in their voices explained why his hand still trembled when he tried to lift his cup. Nothing in their soft words made him feel like he was safe. By the time they wheeled him out to discharge him, the sun had already set. The hallway lights flickered over Laverne's face, and for a moment, she looked older than he'd ever seen her. Like every year, she'd tried to stay strong. Had finally caught up. At home, the apartment smelled like boiled greens and stale coffee. His little sister, Nia, sat on the couch clutching a stuffed rabbit she'd carried since she was a baby. When Elijah stepped through the door, she didn't run to him. She just stared, her big eyes searching his face for some sign he was still. Her brother, Laverne, helped him lower himself onto the worn sofa. The silence settled over them again, thick as a blanket nobody wanted. It was the kind of quiet that said they were all thinking the same thing, but too scared to say it out loud. That night, Elijah lay awake in the dark, staring at the cracked ceiling. He could still feel the knee in his back, the weight of it crushing the air from his lungs. He kept hearing his mother screaming, and the way her voice changed when she realized nobody was coming to help. Laverne sat beside his bed with her hand on his ankle, as if she was afraid he might vanish if she let go. Her mind replayed it over and over, those seconds when she reached for him and was shoved back. The look in his eyes when he realized she couldn't save him. That memory wrapped itself around her heart like a vine she couldn't tear free. In the morning, a neighbor knocked and left a casserole on the stoop without waiting to be seen. Another neighbor sent a text that just said, "Praying for y'all." But nobody stopped by to talk. Nobody offered to call the press. They all knew. What happened when you stepped too far into the light? Elijah's phone buzzed on the table, with messages from friends asking if he was okay. He couldn't bring himself to answer. He didn't know what to say. That he felt hollow, that he felt like he'd died out there on the pavement and the boy who'd come home wasn't the same. Nia finally spoke while he was sipping soup from a cracked bowl. Her voice was so small he almost didn't hear it. "Elijah, are you ever gonna be okay again?" Her question broke something in him. He tried to smile, but it felt wrong on his face. "Yeah," he whispered, though he didn't believe it. "I'll be okay." Laverne turned away so they wouldn't see the tears on her cheeks. She walked into the kitchen and pressed her hand to the counter until her palm ached. She thought about calling the church or the local news, but when she pictured herself standing in front of a camera, she felt her courage shrivel. A few blocks away, the police department issued a short statement. They called it an incident. They said it was under internal review. The words were careful, washed clean of guilt. To them, Elijah wasn't a boy with a future. He was just a file number. And all across the neighborhood, people read those words and felt the same old ache. It was the ache of knowing you could follow every rule and still end up on the ground, begging to breathe. The ache of knowing that speaking up could make you the next name on the news. That night, when the lights went out and the apartment went quiet again, Laverne sat in the dark, listening to her son's unsteady breaths. She told herself she wouldn't let this be the end of him. But inside, she was still haunted by that single moment, his hand reaching for her, and her being too far away to catch it. Marcus Carter didn't knock like a man coming to deliver bad news. He knocked like somebody who already knew the fight was his to win. When Laverne opened the door, she took in the crisp suit, the dark briefcase, the steady eyes. For a second, she almost felt like she could breathe again. "Almost double quotes, Mrs. Harris," he said, voice low but firm. "My name is Marcus Carter. I'm here because I believe what happened to your son was not only wrong, it was illegal." He stepped into their living room and set the briefcase on the coffee table. Elijah sat in the recliner, a blanket draped over his knees. He didn't look up. He hadn't looked anyone in the eye for days. Marcus didn't flinch. He pulled out a stack of papers and a slim black tablet. "I want you to see something," he said. He tapped the screen, and a grainy video flickered to life. Laverne leaned closer. She recognized the street, the diner sign glowing faint in the background. She saw Elijah walking with his head down, hands in his pockets. Then the squad car pulled up. The video didn't have sound, but you didn't need it. You could see the fear in Elijah's body when he turned. The way he froze before they even touched him. "There's a business across the street," Marcus explained. "Security camera caught everything from the corner." He slid the tablet closer to her. "This footage shows no resistance. None." For the first time in days, Laverne felt something spark in her chest besides grief. It was small, but it was bright. Anger. Marcus lifted his eyes to hers. "I filed a motion to preserve all body cam footage. The officers claimed their cameras malfunctioned, but this video proves they lied." Elijah shifted, his eyes finally moving to the screen. His lips parted like he might say something, but no words came. He just stared at his own body, pinned under the weight of men who were supposed to protect him. Laverne reached for her son's hand. She squeezed it hard. "What happens now?" she asked. Marcus straightened his papers. "We sue civil rights violations, excessive force, intentional infliction of emotional distress." His voice never rose. It didn't have to. The conviction was heavy enough to fill the whole room. That night, after Marcus left, Laverne sat at the kitchen table and read every page of the paperwork he'd left behind. Legal words she'd never known stacked up in neat paragraphs, trying to make sense of something senseless. She kept reading until her eyes burned. The next morning, an envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in block letters. "Drop the suit or lose everything." She stood at the counter, the note trembling in her hands. For a moment, she almost tore it up and threw it away. But then she thought of Elijah's face, the way his voice broke when he begged them not to hurt him. She folded the paper and tucked it in the drawer by the stove. The phone started ringing. Reporters asking for statements. Strangers offering prayers. Others calling to say they were making a mistake. That they should be grateful Elijah survived. That it could have been worse. She wanted to scream into the receiver. Grateful? Grateful that her boy was broken, but breathing? Grateful that he'd wake up every morning with the memory of cold metal and rough hands pressing him down. In the evenings, Marcus came by to check on them. He always brought something, a casserole, a folder, a new piece of evidence. He never stayed long. Just enough to remind them they weren't alone. One night, Laverne finally asked the question that had been clawing at her. "Why are you doing this, Mr. Carter?" "Why us?" Marcus set down his briefcase. He looked at her the way a man looks when he's carried the same wound for too many years. "Because I know what it feels like to be told your life doesn't matter," he said softly. "And because real change doesn't start in fancy courtrooms. It starts when ordinary people stand up and say no more." Elijah listened from the hallway, his hand pressed flat to the wall. For the first time since that night, he felt the tiniest stir of something that almost felt like defiance. When Marcus left, Laverne locked the door behind him and turned to her son. "We're not giving up," she said. Her voice didn't shake this time. "They're not going to bury you in a stack of papers and pretend you don't exist." Elijah nodded, slow. He didn't have the strength to say he believed it, but he let himself believe in her. And for now, that was enough. The courtroom smelled like old carpet and stale coffee. Elijah sat at the plaintiff's table in a suit that felt too big, shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the water pitcher in front of him. Every time he looked up, he saw the two officers who'd crushed into the ground. They wouldn't meet his gaze. They stared at their lawyer, at their hands, at the polished wood of the bench, anywhere but him. The jury filed in. 12 strangers carrying the power to decide whether what happened to him was a crime or just another incident to be excused. Marcus sat beside Elijah, his hands folded, expression calm. But when he leaned over, his voice was low and fierce. "You don't have to look at them if you don't want to. But if you can, let them see your face. Let them know you're still here." Elijah lifted his head, even though it made his chest tighten. He could feel all the eyes on him. He told himself he wouldn't look away. The defense attorney stood first. He was tall, with a practiced smile that never reached his eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "this case is about perception. About the difficulty law enforcement faces every day when dealing with individuals who refuse to comply." Laverne's hand clamped over her knee so tight her knuckles turned white. The attorney paced, voice smooth. "My clients were responding to erratic behavior. They feared for their safety. Erratic, dangerous, non-compliant. Words like bullets fired across the room." Elijah shut his eyes and counted his breaths, because if he listened too long, he was afraid he'd stand up and scream. Then Marcus rose, and the hush that followed was thick as tar. He walked to the center of the room, slow and deliberate, holding the tablet like a weapon. "You will hear those words over and over," he told the jury, "because they are easier to believe than the truth. The truth is simple. My client was walking home from work. He was tired, he was polite, he did not resist. He tapped the tablet, and the video appeared on the screen at the front of the courtroom. Laverne's breath caught. She'd watched it a dozen times, but it still felt like a knife to the heart. On the screen, Elijah's slim figure turned to face the officers, hands out. The defense tried to object, claiming the footage was incomplete. The judge overruled them. The video played on, the silent proof of every lie they'd told. When it ended, Marcus turned to the jury. "You can call a thing dangerous all you want," he said, voice steady. "But if it doesn't look dangerous, it isn't." The defense began calling their witnesses. A supervisor from the department. An officer who wasn't there but read the reports. They spoke about procedure, about policy, about reasonable force. Elijah felt each word like a stone stacked on his chest. Then they played the body cam audio. It was fuzzy, distorted. Voices overlapped, and the defense attorney seized on the chance to claim Elijah had threatened the officers. In the jumble of noise, a single word, "don't," was twisted into something violent. Laverne bit her lip until she tasted blood. She wanted to stand up and shout that it was a lie. She wanted to tell them that her son was begging them not to hurt him, not threatening them. But she stayed in her seat, her hand gripping the edge of the bench. Marcus didn't flinch. When the defense finished, he rose again. He played the clean security video in slow motion, showing Elijah never moved toward the officers, never raised a fist, never did anything but try to comply. The jury watched in silence. One woman dabbed her eyes. Marcus called Elijah to the stand. He walked the length of the courtroom, each step feeling heavier than the last. He took the oath, voice hoarse, and sat. "Tell us what you remember," Marcus said. Elijah stared at his hands, the cuffs that weren't there anymore, but still felt real. "I remember being tired," he whispered. "I remember thinking if I did everything right, they'd let me go home." "Did you threaten them?" "No. Did you resist?" He lifted his head, and for the first time, looked straight at the officers across the aisle. "No," he said louder. A quiet settled over the courtroom like a held breath. Marcus called one final witness. An elderly woman, small and frail, rose from the back row. She clutched her purse to her chest as she walked to the stand. Laverne recognized her, the neighbor who'd watched from behind the curtain. Her voice shook as she was sworn in. "I saw the whole thing," she began. "I should have come forward sooner. But I was scared." The defense tried to object. The judge motioned for her to continue. Her eyes darted to Elijah, then back to the jury. "That boy never laid a hand on anyone," she said. "He was just standing there. He looked so afraid." Her chin trembled, but she forced herself to go on. "When they took him down, he didn't fight. He just kept saying, 'Please.' For a moment, nobody moved. The only sound was the steady tick of the clock above the door. Marcus nodded to her, gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you," he said gently. When she stepped down, she avoided the officer's eyes, but she lifted her chin. Like maybe telling the truth had made her lighter. Laverne reached for Elijah's hand and squeezed it. And for the first time since that night, she felt something that wasn't just grief or fear. It was the smallest flicker of hope. The verdict came down on a Wednesday afternoon, when the sky outside the courthouse was the color of wet concrete. Laverne held Elijah's hand so tight neither of them could feel where one ended and the other began. The jury filed back in, solemn, eyes lowered. Each step they took felt like it carried the weight of every long night, every silent ache, every name that came before Elijah's. The foreperson cleared her throat. She looked at the judge, then at the papers in her hands. The room went so quiet. Laverne could hear the air moving in and out of her lungs. "In the matter of Harris versus the city," the woman began, voice steady, "we find the defendants liable." Laverne's vision blurred. She felt her knees buckle. Elijah's arm shot out to steady her. For a moment, she thought she might sink right through the floor. But then she felt the heat of her son's hand gripping hers, and she forced herself to stand. The judge thanked the jury, dismissed them. Lawyers began to gather their things. Papers shuffled. Chairs scraped. But all Laverne could hear was that single word echoing in her chest, "liable." It didn't change what happened. It didn't take away the nights Elijah woke up gasping. It didn't erase the fear she'd seen in his eyes. But it meant someone finally had to say out loud that what they did was wrong. That her boy wasn't nothing. That he mattered. The clerk read the damages awarded. Numbers printed on a page, meant to measure pain as if dollars could ever come close. Marcus leaned in, voice low. "This is significant," he said gently. "More than most ever get." Laverne nodded, though it didn't feel like victory. It felt like standing on the other side of a storm, looking at everything the wind had torn away. When they stepped out onto the courthouse steps, cameras flashed in their faces. Microphones were thrust forward. Reporters started shouting questions. All at once, voices tumbling over each other. "Mrs. Harris, how does it feel to have won?" Laverne looked at them, their pens ready, their lenses hungry for some tidy answer. She felt Elijah beside her, quiet, watching. She thought about all the other mothers who never got to stand here. The ones who buried their children without a single person held accountable. She swallowed hard. "It doesn't feel like a win," she said finally, her voice raw. "It feels like survival." For a moment, nobody knew what to say. The cameras kept clicking, but the questions stopped. Marcus guided them down the steps, through the crowd. Each person they passed seemed to part just enough to let them through. Like the sea itself recognized it was time to let them go. That evening, they sat around the kitchen table. The casserole dishes had all been cleared. The TV was turned off. It was just them, and the quiet. But this time, the silence didn't feel like surrender. It felt like something waiting to grow. Elijah studied his hands, the same hands that had once been pressed to the pavement. He flexed them slowly, as if testing whether they still belonged to him. Laverne watched him, her chest tight with something too big for words. He looked up, meeting her eyes. "I'm still here," he said, voice rough but steady. She reached across the table, laid her palm over his. "I know," she whispered. "And that's everything." A few days later, Elijah walked back into the hospital for a final checkup. The halls were bright with morning light, and each step he took felt like reclaiming a piece of himself. The nurses smiled at him when he passed, their eyes soft with recognition. When he pushed open the doors to leave, the air outside smelled like rain. He paused on the threshold, breathing it in. He didn't feel whole. Maybe he never would. But he felt alive. Laverne and Nia were waiting by the curb. He walked to them, slow but unbroken, and when he reached them, they all joined hands. A single quiet moment where the world seemed to hold its breath. If you're hearing this now, I want you to remember one thing. This is David, and you're watching Injustice Voice. Every name matters. Every story deserves to be told. If you believe that too, subscribe, leave a comment, and stand with us. Because no one should ever have to fight this battle alone.